Hello, was macht ihr? I hope everyone is gesund, stark und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today is a very, very great day. Zayin Oder, the Yom Ledes, and Yom Astalkas Hilula of Moshe Rabbeinu. And it's the honor of this day that we have the whole miracle of Purim, as the Gemara explains. We're not going to get into it now. But this also shows on the perfection of the level of tzidkis, righteousness of Moshe Rabbeinu and his holiness, that only by the greatest and the greatest of tzaddikim do we see in a revealed way how they were born and they passed away on the same day, which shows in the ultimate perfection of their entire lives. So we have to understand the connection between this week's parasha, Parshas Terumah, and Zayin Oder Moshe Rabbeinu. As we'll discuss it, before we start, as usual, our hearts and minds with our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. Mashiach should come now. We should win the war. All the houses should return home immediately. And we're adding, in these weeks, tzedakah, gdeilut tzedakah, shemakareves and sageula. So in honor of Moshe Rabbeinu, in honor of the victory of Klal Yisrael, we're giving tzedakah and we should see the results immediately. We'll go to the usual prayer, which we're going to connect with this week's parsha. And this is part of Birchas Kishma by Avas Olam. Oh, v'yino, avaracham, hamerachim, rachim, no leinu. We turn to Hashem, we say, our Father, merciful Father, was compassionate. Have mercy on us. We beseech you. We beg you to have mercy on us. So we turn to the Eibishter as our Father. Okay, in this week's parsha is the beginning of a hemshech, a continuation of the next 5 parshas. Parshas Terumah, Tetzaveh, Kisisa, Vayakel, and Pekudei are basically all talking about the construction of the Mishkan. So we see how this is such a general subject in the Torah that we have 5 parshas that are connected and devoted to this subject. I don't think we find it about any other subject in such detail and over so many parshas. That one theme, mamish, literally. So from this we see how general it is, how important it is, how fundamental it is to Yiddishkeit and to Judaism. In general, first I'm going to give an introduction, and the focus of today's shir is just like the idea of the construction of the Mishkan is something which is fundamental and huge if we think about the principles of Yiddishkeit. So too, it's true concerning other concepts that are related. Like, for example, we have this whole discussion in Chassidus about Neshamas Yisrael and Torah. Who is greater, the Jewish nation or the Torah? It's a very, very deep concept which is discussed in many discourses of Chassidus, but there is some clarity. And this is also going to be touched upon in today's talk. Before we begin, let's give the general introduction. The general introduction is that when Hashem says, "Va'osuli migdash v'shachanti b'soicha," make for me a sanctuary, and then Hashem resides with the Bnei Yisrael through the sanctuary, what was accomplished is, in a certain sense, the climax, the whole point of everything, even greater in a certain sense than Matan Torah. And this is, how do we know this? We know this because there's a pasuk that Hashem says, "Bosi legani achisi kala." Hashem says, I return to my garden, Bosi legani, my garden, my place, which means planet Earth. And as everyone knows in the Hasidic discourse, let's start with that verse. Hashem says this when the Mishkan is erected and completed in Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So when does Hashem call planet Earth, this world, his home? After we make a Mishkan. And really, that's the real beginning of the actualization of the whole purpose of it all. Hashem wants this place to be a dwelling place for him, and that's the mission of the Jewish nation. Our connection is going to be emphasized and made more intense and greater by us doing the mission of uncovering and revealing the godliness which is already in the world, because Hashem is everywhere. But it was our job to peel away the concealment, to peel away the facade, the veil of what's going on in the world, and to show how godliness is throughout the whole world. And that's why, when does Hashem say, Bosi Lagani, I came to my garden, this planet? Not by Matan Torah. Why? In brief, because by Matan Torah you could argue and say, Hashem came down on the mountain. It's a revelation. But it's an act of God. The fact that he can come down on the mountain, that's no chiddush. That's no major accomplishment. What's a greater accomplishment? An achievement of God, an achievement of God, or an achievement of man? God coming down on the mountain, Hashem coming down on Har Sinai, Vayered Havai al Har Sinai. He could do what he wants. He could do anything. V'nikla kvei davaya. He decides to reveal himself. But when man makes a contribution, Terumah, Miloshn Harama, when he takes from the physical materials of this world and he offers it up as a contribution and he elevates and he transforms the material into spiritual, that's an accomplishment, that's an achievement. As a matter of analogy, we could say, and we spoke about this I'm sure many times, what's greater when the king comes uninvited to your home and just barges through the front door? Of course the king could do that. The king could do whatever he wants. But really what's beautiful, when the person prepares his home, he polishes the floor, he worked on cleaning his house to be distinguished from every other place on the planet. And then the king comes, because the person invites him, and he says, my friend, my king, not my friend, my king, I've worked, toiled very hard to make my home the most appropriate, befitting residence for you. And that's what the idea of Rosh Chodesh Nisan is. And that's why Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the day the Mishkan was erected, is an unbelievable day, etc. Okay. Now, the Ramban, who speaks about Sefer Shmois, and he calls it Sefer HaGeula, that's why Shmois is called Exodus, brings out another unbelievable point about this, that therefore the Sefer Shmois ends by Pekudei, because when is really the full Geula? Guess what? Listen to this. The Geula of Am Yisrael, you would think maybe it's complete when they go into Eretz Yisrael, which that's the real end of Dvarim. When Moshe Rabbeinu passes away in V'zei Bracha, starts Tanakh when Yeshua conquers the land. So at the end of Dvarim, we see how the story of the Jews wandering in the desert is over, and then they're going into Eretz Yisrael. But wait, we see no. The Sefer Shmois, the book of Exodus, ends by Pekudei, which means when we finish the story, when we begin the actualization of Hashem's residing in the Mishkan, that means the redemption is complete. Because the story of the Mishkan is the beginning of the actualization of the Eibishter's plan of making this world a Dira B'Tachtenim. And therefore, Sefer Shmois, which is called Sefer HaGeula, the book of redemption, the nation is redeemed. We transcend the limitations and the laws of nature. And what makes us distinguished is when we have this Mishkan, and which symbolizes our work of transforming the world. And that's how we transcend. We're higher than the rest of the world. When we have a life where we elevate the material into spiritual, we make the physical holy, then we're free. Okay. Now let's take it a step further. In addition, another point which is very important to say here, and it's spoken about by all the commentators. We have to realize that the Mishkan is the secrets of the secrets, the deepest of the deepest, the mystical of the mystical, the Kabbalah of the Kabbalah. Don't think it's, like I said before, don't think it's some Lego book that tells us manual instructions, put the sockets here, put the beams there, put the loaf breads there. No, that Mishkan, as it's brought down in Kabbalah Take, in Pnimis HaTorah, and all the Midrashim, and in Mamorah Razal, there's a Loshen Mishkan de Lamayla, Mishkan Lamata. Everybody speaks about it. So Shoinim, Achreinim. that the Mishkan is actually a map, a manual of the deepest of level of intimacy on a cosmic level of Seder Shtalshalis, which means if you know all the mysteries of the Mishkan, you know all about Hashem and levels in Hashem, but also in our avodas Hashem, in our inner service of Hashem, as we know, it doesn't say I will dwell in it, I will dwell in them, which means that when a person went to the Beis HaMikdash, and here he saw the Shulchan, or here he saw the Mizbeach HaChitzin, and there's the Kochim, and there's the Kier, and there's the Menorah, and there's the Oren. Each one of these things are corresponding to a different part of the person in his Avodas Hashem, and he's supposed to meditate and think about what this demands and calls out in the person, how to become closer to Hashem. So on every single level, there's layers and layers of commentators talking about each one of the aspects of the Mishkan, the coverings, everything has a deep, profound significance on every single level, both in a level of Milmayla Lamata Ilah, talking about the Eibishter, and both on a level of Tata Tachtoin, the human being in his service, Milmata Lamayla to Hashem. Okay, this was all the introduction. How it's so important to stress the stories of these, the messages of these weeks, because that's the command. Every one of these weeks, in addition to the point of V'aseh L'migdash, Achmein Leben with the Parsha, in addition to the usual thing we say we have to live with the Parsha. By the way, the Rebbe said that he gave a special instruction that in the next couple of weeks we should learn the Parshas, especially with Rashi more than usual and the commentators. And I think one of the reasons is because since the whole idea of it in the first place is V'shachanti b'seicham, that means we have to internalize it properly, so it should resonate and we should think about it. Anyways, now let's get to the first object, so to speak, that we're meant to build in the Mishkan. And what is that? The Oren. Now, there's a big machlokes. What I'm going to say today, hopefully we'll cover a Sikha of the Rebbe in Chelik Chavav, Terumah. I think it's Terumah Beis. It's a moiridik Sikha, which is going to speak the Pnimius Inyanim of the Sikha. And the Rebbe gets into a machlokes of the Ramban and Rashi. There's a machlokes when it comes to the building of the ark. There was the kapayos, that's the cover, and then there's a kruvim on top of the cover. So one machlokes between the Ramban and Rashi is whether the whole Oren has to first be built and without the kapayos and the kruvim, and we could put the edus inside the Oren, or no, we have to have the kapayos and the kruvim also. In other words, according to the Ramban, the Oren is not an Oren without the lid. The lid and the kruvim, it's all part of the Oren. According to Rashi, it's not. That means, according to Rashi, we could put the edus into the Oren without the lid and without the kruvim. According to the Ramban, it has to be only after we have the lid. Okay, and there's a couple of other... Okay, another argument is, what's the kruvim about? What do they signify? What do they reflect? According to Rashi, Rashi says there was the image of children. He says, ketinik, like children. In other words, the message is that the kruvim represent the Jews. As we'll soon explain, Yidden. Bnei Yisrael, Kol Yisrael. According to the Ramban, the kruvim is really a reflection of the Malachim, Maise Merkov al Derech, the vision of Yecheskel. And it's since the whole idea of the Mishkan is really about Hashoyas Hashchina, the Ramban writes very much by Riches how the whole idea of the Mishkan is really a reenactment of Sinai. It's about the Oren is the main part of the Mishkan, and just like the Jewish nation cannot exist without a Torah, as the famous Psad Yegoyin Umaneseinu Uma El Al Yidei Torah, the whole nation. What makes the Jewish nation different than the other nation is that we have Torah. So too, when it comes to the Mishkan, everything in the Mishkan, the main point is the Oren. That's the focal point. And the Torah in the Oren is the main point. And therefore the Kruvim also represents a level of Hashem of Gilei Elokus, part of the Giluyim that happened in Matan Torah. They saw all the levels of the Seder Shtalshalos. So now the Rebbe explains in the Sikha, in Chelik Chavav, a Moedik word, really which touches on another subject in secular language, if Judaism is a race or it's a religion, which really comes to the question of what's higher, Neshamas Yisrael, Yidden, or Torah? What does it mean? Now, this is the word that Melech used to say all the time, and in this Sikha and Likutei Sichos, the Rebbe actually speaks with that language. And it goes like this. In Giluyim, if we look at it in the revealed way, so Torah is higher than Neshamas Yisrael. Because Torah is Torah Oyer, Torah is light, it's the illumination. And we need Torah to connect the Yid to the Eibishter. That's how we speak, generally speaking. And I think I once gave an analogy for this, and I think it's a pretty good analogy if I may say so. Imagine you have a diamond in your basement. You have gems, but the light's not switched on. So we need the light to see the beauty of the diamond. What's more valuable? Let's say, just for argument's sake, the diamond or the light? Of course. The whole point is the diamond, and the diamond is really higher. But we have to realize that without light, we'll never appreciate the diamond. So therefore, in the end, the light is also essential. And this is one way of looking at Torah. Torah is Oyer. And therefore, we need the Torah, the religion that brings out the beauty of the race. Yiddishkeit is a chidush that it starts really with the race. Every Jew is essentially connected to the Eibishter, regardless of how much he practices the religion or not. But the fact is, without the religion, without Torah, Torah we won't see the beauty of the diamond. We won't see the beauty of the race. And of course, Eraisa v'Kuchabrichu and Neshamas Yisrael, one, Yisrael, Eraisa v'Kuchabrichu, Kulachad. They're all really, obviously, the Eibush himself. And we're not going to get into it now, but it's a discussion like this, depending on which levels we're talking about, how we see it. Do we see it more that Torah is mashpia on Yisrael, or that Yisrael even accomplishes something in Torah? So what the Rebbe says in the Sikha is that the Ramban is talking about Giluyim. So in Giluyim, Torah is Oyer, so therefore Torah is more important, and therefore that's what we have to discuss first. The main point of the Oren is Torah, and Torah overrides and supersedes everything else. But according to Rashi, this is the beauty, unbelievable, profound. What's the deepest of the deep? Even in a place where we're talking about the Koche Kochim, Lifnai V'Lifnim, and the Oren, and the ark of where the Torah is, and the Torah is Chachma Shel Kodesh Baruch Hu, and even there we're saying that what? On top of that is a kapoiris. And the Rebbe says, according to Rashi, kapoiris, in Miloshin kapara. Because atonement, there's a mile of tshuva. Tshuva shows that even if a Jew steps out of line, no matter where you may roam, you could always come back home. There's a level of tshuva, which is the idea of bala rotzen, which is higher than rotzen. I don't want to get into this thing at length. And on top of the kapoiris, there's the kruvim. And they represent the Yidden, because they are the face of Tinuk, and the Pasuk, the Balaturim brings down over here, Kinar Yisrael v'yaveyu. We'll soon get into that. So that's how the Rebbe explains the machlokes between Ramban, the Ramban and Rashi. One is talking about in Giluyim, so therefore Torah is greater. One is talking about Be'etzem, so therefore Yisrael is greater. Okay, now I want to get to the Balaturim and show you a couple of Balaturim. There really is more, but just at least, first of all, let's get back to the question. We have a question. Why is it that from all the things that were made in the Mishkan, we start with the Oren? And the answer is because we start with Oyer. The Balaturim, on the words Oren, the Pasuk says, V'osu Arein Atzei Shitim, Balaturim Arein Oisius Oyron, which means the letters Arein, Aleph Reish Vav Nun, equals Oyron, light. And he says the following words, Sheyesh ba Oyron shall Yisrael, for within it is the light of Israel. Stop. So over here I want to say that he means two things, Ulei Shlema. Number one, we have to start with the Oren because Oren is the light. And just like we see by the Asara Mamoris, as is well known, what was the first thing the Eibishter created when it came to the world? Oir. Vayemer Elokim, here, and the first thing that's created is light. Why? Because without light, we can't get anywhere. The same thing is over here. Without the light of Torah, you don't know what Yisrael is. Like the diamond and the light. So, number one, I want to say two things about the light. Number one, without light, we can't do anything. We don't know where we're going. So, Torah is the guide for everything and every step of our life. Just like in the world, the first thing the Eibishter created is Oir, which also is because the whole point is to live a life of light. We're into illumination. And I'm Paul the Imamanan. Be positive, spread the light, emit light, illuminate, enlighten. So that's number one. And that's why that's the first creation in the world. Our mission is to bring light into the world. And the same thing is over here. Our mission is to illuminate the world through Torah. But it also means not only as a light, as a guide, as a compass, as a GPS, but it also means Oyran Shal Yisrael, the beauty of the Yidden. Man darf erst reingucken in Torah zu sehen, was Yidden seinen. You want to know what the Gewalt of a Yid is? Learn Chassidus that tells you what a Yid is. Look into Torah to tell you what a Yid is. And this is what it says in many places in Chassidus. Why, for example, by Simchas Torah, we start with the Pesukei HaTorah. Chassidus brings out the point, because even though we dance with the Torah, it's a level of Torah which is not about knowledge, it's really about the essential bond of a Yid and Hashem. With Torah Tzivilonu Moshe Meirasha Kilos Yaakov. The point is, no, we have to start with the Pesukim. We have to look into Torah to see the beauty of Yid. We look into Torah, and Torah itself reveals, in a way of light, how the Yid is higher than Torah. Torah reveals how the Yid is higher than Torah. And the same thing it says concerning Rosh Hashanah. We say the Pesukim Malchus, Shizachrenis, and Shefer. Same thing. Everything comes to Torah. Torah is always the flashlight. Torah is the guide. Torah illuminates everything. So without Torah, we can't move. And therefore, Taka, on one level, the reason why the first thing that we make is the Oren is because the Oren is the thing that illuminates everything. Then the Baal Turim says, V'oisis noira, ki'eish echeles. It's getting very late, so we're not going to elaborate. But that's also the point. Just to see how the power of Torah is and how unbelievable Torah is. So noira means it's awesome. It's like when we say Pella. It's like saying no matter how much we could discuss what Torah accomplishes and the impact of Torah and how it's never ending, we still haven't scratched the surface. It's Noira. Okay, I want to get back to the Sikha, even though there's so much to discuss. So the Baal HaTurim, when he speaks about the Kruvim, he says, Kiravya. The word Kruvim comes from the word Kiravya, and that means like a youth. And then he brings the pasuk, Kinar Yisrael ve'eveu. So over here in Chassidus, and the Rebbe doesn't elaborate, he just mentions in the Ha'orah that the Baal HaTurim mentions, but at the Diuk, I think, L'chaira, what the Rebbe is saying, and this is the real meaning, and the depth and profundity of the Baal HaTurim, is that the image of the Kruvim is not an adult male or adult female, or you could have had an image of a father and a child. It's the idea of Nar Yisrael ve'eveu. Why? Because the real essential bond of a Yid with Torah, the real essential bond of a Yid with Hashem that transcends Torah is in this analogy of a father and child. But what sort of child? A baby. And that's what it emphasizes in the words Kinar Yisrael ve'eveu. There's a pasuk that says Bonim atam Hashem Elokeichem. We're like children to Hashem. There's another passage that says, B'ni b'chayri Yisrael. We're not only just a child, we're B'ni b'chayri. But then there's something greater, something deeper. Kinar Yisrael ve'eveu. And for us in Chabad, we also know this in the Agoda, by the Seder, The Chabad custom is before we start the 4 questions, we go Tatich vel ba de fragen de 4 kashas. Before the manashtana, it says Gam mishein le'av, even someone who doesn't have a father and he's not talking to his father, says Tatich vel ba de fragen de 4 kashas. He's talking to Hashem. And the Rebbe brings in the Rebbe's commentary on the Agada, because we want to emphasize and bring out from within us. We turn essence to essence. We cry out to Hashem, Tate, Tate, Tate. And it's the baby child that brings out and touches the depth of the Father like nothing else. If you have a child that's older, then you start saying, look, my child is so smart. He's a child prodigy. He plays piano amazing. He says Chidushei Torah amazing. You start having some dreams about him. My son, the doctor, the lawyer, the accountant, the God will be Yisrael, call whatever you want. But Davka, the baby, the one who's mipi oil in the yankim, the one who is just a baby, and the father could be a CEO of the greatest company in the world, and the Baal Shem Tov is a marshal from this actually, that the father will drop everything and squeal and delight together with his baby. And that's more important to the father than everything else that's going on in the life of the father. When he sees the baby squealing in joy and glee, it touches the father deeper than everything else. But which child touches the father deeper than everyone else? The baby child. And you see how the baby child brings out a greater expression of love on the part of the father than the adult child. And why? Because by the adult child, Giluyim is Amahel of Etzem. When there's other things that come into play, talents, behavior, lifestyle habits, etc., then, whatever. But when we're talking about the baby, before any expectations, essence to essence, etc. And this is the face of the Kruvim. And this is the message, that if we look at the whole Mishkan, so many things are going on over here. There's a shulchan, there's a kir, there's menorah, then there's the kachim with lifnim, the ultimate, the oren, and then we say, what tops it all off? What's it really all about? Machshavtan sheYisrael kodma l'chol davar. Nothing is more important, nothing is greater than the Yid. And there's a lot to talk about. So we're just going to go straight to the connection to Zion Oder and Moshe Rabbeinu. There's 2 stories and 2 sichas where the Rebbe talks about it, where we see this very concept. Who was the one who brought out in a demonstrative manner how the Iskashrus Atzmus of Neshamas Yisrael is greater. The Iskashrus Atzmus of Neshamas Yisrael with the Eibishter is greater than the connection through Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu. And in 2 episodes, 2 things that happened, 2 events that happened in connection to the Chet HaEgel, the worst sin that ever was done. Number 1 was when he came down from the mountain, he smashed the luchos. And the Eibishter told him, Yashikoyach Sheshibarta. Now's not the time to get into it, but there's a Sikh from the Rebbe, a very famous one, the Likutei Sichos, and based on a talk that he gave in Simchas Torah, and the Rebbe was sobbing, and I was there. I couldn't hear it so well, but the Rebbe sobbed by that for bringing more than I don't remember every another time. And the point was that that Moshe Rabbeinu smashes the luchos because the luchos make the Yidden obligated, and they make him being guilty, so to speak, because it's like a marriage contract. And Moshe Rabbeinu decides that the Jews' existence is more important than the whole covenant. Or to put it in different language, the connection, the covenant is even greater than the contract. The race idea, in a way, is higher than the religion idea. And therefore Moshe smashes the luchos. Etzem is hecha from Giluyim. And he gets a yashkoyach. And that's at the end of the Torah. That's his greatest achievement. You could think his greatest achievement is that he gave us the Torah. But in a certain sense, the culmination. And how do we finish the whole Torah? By discussing how he broke the luchos. And the concept, according to Chassidus, of his breaking the luchos is to show that the essential bond between the Yid and Hashem is greater than the one that is accomplished through the Torah. That's one story. And the other story is next week's Parsha Tetzaveh. Everyone knows about it. We spoke about it. Why Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned in Tetzaveh. It's the only Parsha from the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu which his name is not mentioned. And it's because Moshe told Hashem that if you're not going to forgive the Jews after the Chet HaEgel, then you could take my name out of the Torah. Just delete me from the entire Torah. Wow, wow, wow. Moshe says, there's nothing more important than the Jew. And even my connection to the Torah, to you, Hashem, should be just taken out. And because we have a certain rule that when a wise person says something, it has to be fulfilled to a certain degree. I don't want to get into the whole story now. So therefore, one Parsha, Moshe's name, is taken out to reflect this idea that he said his name should be taken out. But the Chiddush of Chassidus is that, guess what? This was also the greatest thing that Moshe did, one of the greatest. Because when it says Va'ata, it's higher than names. There's essence which is higher than names. Every time where it says Moshe, it's the level of Giluyim of Moshe. It's the revealed level of Moshe, which is connected with the revealed way how a Yid becomes connected to Hashem. But if we talk about essence to essence, the Ata, his Ata, Moshe's essence, is expressed when he has self-sacrifice for the Jewish nation. And that's even greater because it shows how his essence gets directly connected to Hashem. And to connect it with Spashtusa the Moshe B'chol Dara V'Dara, in every generation we have a Moshe who also brought this out and brings this out. The Rebbe, there's thousands of stories you could bring about the Rebbe, about alienated Jews and estranged Jews and people that were so far you cannot imagine, and how the Rebbe ignited their essential iskashras atzmis that they had with Hashem. And from that they came to Torah and they went from level to level. Just to finish up with one vort, one story. I'm not sure if I said this story before. There's a Rabbi Shmuel Pesach Bogomilsky who went on Mecca Shlichus. That was a Chabad visiting program in the summer. He was a student and it's 1959. Tafshin Yutes. And he went to a Caribbean island, Barbados. And he landed in the airport. And he met somebody, Aryeh Leib Speisman, and this person tells Shmuel Pesach Bogomilsky the following. Ich hab geleint in der Zeitung, I read in the papers, as ihr seid Schluchim von dem Lubavitcher Rebbe, that you are emissaries of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, und as ihr fort da rum zu mechazig sein Yiddishkeit, and you're visiting people to strengthen Yiddishkeit. So, Lomerach de Zelen, wer ich bin. I just want to tell you who I am. He says, ich bin akekafte de leimor nachtfilm. I don't put on film. Ich bin nebach hamachal Shabbos. I don't keep Shabbos. Alas. Ich bin eichel tarfes. I don't eat kosher. I eat treif. And then he said, and Bogomilsky says, these are the words the man said, Azevi ein chovish mater atzmoi. Ein chovish mater atzmoi b'beiso asurim. Just like a prisoner cannot free himself from prison. So he told these Bochum, Zait me maske van Rebbe, please mention me, my name, to the Rebbe. The Rebbe can mir arushleppen from Blotto. Those are the words he says. The Rebbe is the one who could drag me out, lift me up from the mud, from the muck. And that's what happened through this Aryeh Leib Speisman. Rabbi Bogomilsky was able to arrange a bris for 18 Jewish children that were never circumcised before. And he was able to do great things for Yiddishkeit in Barbados. And then, this is what's so one other beautiful part of the story, he arranged for him to come to New York, to Brooklyn, this Aryeh Leib Speisman, and he arranged, Rabbi Bogomilsky arranged the Yechidus for him with the Rebbe, and he davened one day when he was in New York, in the morning, in the Rebbe's minyan, and the Rebbe, who was in the minyan, told the Gaboyim, made a sign, arranged, that this Aryeh Leib Speisman, who was a Levi, should get the Aliyah for Levi. So here was somebody who at that time wasn't really so-called so observant. You know, you have synagogues, and Aliyah is a kibbut. It's an honor to get an Aliyah. Not everyone gets an Aliyah. And especially in the Rebbe's minyan. Not necessarily everyone getting aliyah, even though the Rebbe has really nothing to do with it. Usually. The Rebbe comes and he gets an aliyah, the Rebbe gets an aliyah, like by every single congregation, the rabbi gets an aliyah, and he gets a very honorable aliyah. There's something associated to special aliyahs. But here the Rebbe went out of his way to make sure that he should get an aliyah, this Eilib Speisman, even though externally you could say he wasn't such a, mainstream, respectable. And here you see how the Rebbe bypasses everything, makes no difference. Who cares if he's Hashene, Feine, Bakovidik? It's irrelevant. The Rebbe sees his neshama, the Rebbe sees a diamond, the Rebbe sees top of the top, the best of the best in everyone. And through that, little by little, this person became more and more observant, and that's the Rebbe's job. As a Moshe Rabbeinu, is Pashtusa the Moshe B'chol Dara V'Dara. The Rebbe is the Moshe Rabbeinu. That's even a greater light than Torah, that could straight trigger ignite the person's neshama. And once he ignites the person's neshama, then little by little more Torah, more light comes there and brings out the beauty of the neshama more and more. So that's the lesson of today's parsha, all about the Oren. And we should all make resolutions for Havas Yisrael. As the war going on, everyone says the same thing. Yachad ninatzeach. The more that we will bring out the idea of Havas Yisrael, will be U'Bocheinu Avinu Kulonu Ke'echad. The more we bring Achdus, the more we get blessings from Hashem. So we should bring out the Havas Yisrael, and this will bring the Gula Mitzvah Shleima, take Mad Mamish now. The schus from Moshe Rabbeinu should bring only blessings and reveals chasodim to every single yid. The chol b'nei Yisrael b'chol makom sheim. Posting from my home, Bez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.